future of the US and EU's trading relationship is the topic of my conversation today with Laura Fraedrich. She is senior counsel in the global trade and national security practice of Lowenstein Sandler. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Robert. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. And thanks so much for joining me again. I really appreciate it. This, of course, is an ongoing topic about the relationship between the US and the EU. But more recently, since our last conversation, I believe the US rolled back tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from the EU. And then, of course, there's the topic of our previous conversation where the two set aside their longstanding dispute over aerospace subsidies. I'd just like to hear your view right now as to how you believe these moves have affected the relationship of these two giant trading entities.
Well, I think it's been very significant. And in addition to the two things you mentioned, they also seem to have at least temporarily resolved the digital services tax issue, where the U.S. was applying additional tariffs in retaliation for their view that the digital services tax was overwhelming on some of the U.S. multinational corporations. So all three of those things, the Airbus-Boeing dispute, the changing of the steel and aluminum tariffs to a tariff rate quota, and putting a pause on the digital service tax dispute have all happened in 2021. That's very significant. It's very significant in paving the way for future cooperation, as we thought we were going to see right after President Biden was elected. And I think it took just a little bit of a slower process than we thought we might see. I think President Biden wanted to very carefully study things, see what had happened. Obviously, a lot had happened in the trade arena in the Trump administration. But now settling these disputes and putting them aside has paved the way for future cooperation. And indeed, we see that in the establishment of the Trade and Technology Council between the EU and the US. And this council had its first meeting in Pittsburgh at the end of September. And I think that is the beginning of seeing some more cooperation between the two entities.
What is that council out to do? What's its mission?
Its mission is to work on technology issues, foreign direct investment issues, and supply chain issues. There are about a dozen working groups. They're very concerned about export controls and technology and understanding what the future of technology will look like and how it should be controlled. They're very concerned about digital issues and also supply chain issues, particularly for things like semiconductors, where there's been a little bit of a shortage right now, particularly given the concerns about trading with China and some of the Asian manufacturers of semiconductors.
I wonder, though, I mean, other than simply the Biden administration coming in and saying we want to make nice with the EU, are there some geopolitical and strategic considerations that are drawing the two entities back together again, such as an attempt to assert more leverage over China or anything like that? Or is that part of the issue?
Absolutely. I think it is very geopolitically directed. And I do think the common enemy is China. And I think the concern that both the US and the EU have tried for decades to bring China along in a more democratic trade relationship, and seeing that that's not working and that things right now are not in a great place, particularly with the human rights concerns related to the Uyghurs and so forth. So I think that it is definitely a cooperative stance against a common enemy.
Okay, but they still, I'm sure, have their differences. What are some of the biggest issues that continue to exist, the unresolved issues that maybe they're punting on, but still exist between the US and the EU?
Yeah, there are definitely still some differences. For example, right now there's a WTO case on trade remedies related to olives from Spain. There is, of course, some of the disagreements that they have had over economic sanctions issues. For example, our continuing embargo of Cuba and their blocking laws saying that EU entities cannot comply with the US embargo on Cuba. So there are some smaller things in the background, but really putting aside these three issues that have been resolved this year is quite huge. They have been the three sticking points. And remember, I mean, we have more, the United States has more trade with the EU, more foreign direct investment 3 times more than it does with all of Asia. So it's a very strong trading partner with relatively low tariffs between the parties, around 3%.
Mm-hmm.
So putting aside these large disputes, even though there are a few smaller things in the background, it's really significant for the relationship going forward.
How does the future of the WTO affect the ongoing relationship between the US and EU? And by that, I mean specifically reforming their appeals body, which is pretty weak, or if not existing at all at the moment. How might that, on an ongoing basis, affect this trading relationship?
I mean, I think it could help. I think they both share the goal of reforming it. I think historically, more of the disputes are with the Asian countries for mm-hmm. both the EU and the US. But I think seeing a strong dispute resolution system at the WTO is something that both sides want, the EU and the US.
Meanwhile, the United States, of course, is going to be pursuing stronger ties with England, with the UK, post-Brexit. Does that in any way affect our relationship with the EU, or can we do both at the same time without any issues?
I think we can do both at the same time without any issues. I think they, all three of the entities are aligned generally in terms of political issues and geopolitical risks. So I think it can go in parallel.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem to indicate a move back toward the idea of multilateral trade agreements as opposed to the exclusively bilateral approach that the Trump administration preferred to take. Do you agree that that might be the direction for the Biden administration going forward?
Yes, I definitely do. But I think it's going to be slow. I think this technology and trade and tech council, we'll see how that goes for a few years. And then maybe they'll talk about some sort of bigger agreement. I think there's a really bad taste in the mouth, particularly in the EU, over the failed TTIP negotiations.
I was going to ask you about that one. Is that dead now, or is that still in the car? Yeah.
Not going to happen. It's dead. But I think that the EU in particular has some concerns over the way that ended with the Trump administration and so forth. And I think it's going to be a little while till everybody gets back to the table for such a large undertaking as a big multilateral trade agreement. But I do think this Trade and Tech Council is a good move in the right direction, and they'll be able to meet regularly and feel each other out and work on some of these very important near-term issues to figure out how to handle the technology, the foreign direct investment, export control issues, supply chain issues.
Is the EU convinced that we're back in the game? I mean, we're a couple of years away from several years away from another presidential election, which could turn everything on its head again. And for that matter, so could the midterms. I mean, how can they trust us to stay on track now with the kind of friendship that we've been extending to them?
Well, I do think they think we're back in the game now, but you're completely correct that new elections could turn things on their head, as we saw happen in 2016. So I don't know what we'll see, but I think resolving these three major issues, reducing the tariff disputes between the parties, putting this council together with regular meetings and a regular plan of attack to try to mitigate the geopolitical risks that they're seeing around the world is a terrific step in the right direction.
And no more punishing one sector in order to get at another, like putting tariffs on wine because you're mad at aerospace or anything like that.
Right.
Well, good. That's good news. All right, Laura Fraedrich, always good to talk to you again from Lowenstein Sandler. Bring us up to date on the US-EU love affair, or whatever we want to call it. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date. I really do appreciate talking to me again.
Great talking to you too, Robert. Take care.
Thank you.